Take a look at this young lady.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death.
You may be thinking, is this some sort of twisted joke? Surely there must be some force of injustice being carried out for this young girl to be condemned to pay the ultimate price. Well, if Don't Judge a Book by its cover was ever a living, breathing person, it would be this girl. This girl who many would consider the most feared woman in a US prison, but in the dark underbelly of the American correctional system, there are even more women whose names strike fear into the hearts of both inmates and guards alike. These women have committed heinous crimes and have gained a reputation for their ruthless behavior behind bars. From notorious gang leaders to cold-blooded killers, this video will delve into the lives and crimes of these formidable women. Prepare to be shocked as we uncover the chilling stories of these inmates, their rise to infamy, and the terrifying power they hold within the prison walls. Krista Pike. In the shadowy corners of Krista Gale Pike's life, a troubled past laid the foundation for a descent into darkness. Born on March 10, 1976, Pike's early years were marked by turmoil and instability. As she grew older, her path took a sinister turn, leading her down a twisted road of obsession and violence. Pike's troubled upbringing was a harbinger of the darkness that would consume her. She dropped out of high school, finding solace in the company of those who shared her fascination with the occult and devil worship. It was during this time that Pike's life intersected with that of Tatterell Shipp, a man a year her junior. Together, they delved deeper into the realms of the occult, their shared interests fueling a dangerous obsession. But it was Pike's jealousy that would prove to be her undoing. She became fixated on her classmate, Colleen Slemmer, a 19-year-old university student. Pike believed that Slemmer was trying to steal her boyfriend, a claim that Slemmer's friends vehemently denied. Consumed by her irrational rage, Pike hatched a sinister plan to exact revenge on Slemmer. Alongside her friend, Shadala Peterson, Pike plotted to lure Slemmer to an isolated, abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee campus. Little did Slemmer know that she was walking into a nightmare, a web of darkness spun by Pike and her accomplices. On that fateful day, January 12, 1995, Pike, Shipp, Peterson, and Slemmer signed out of the dormitory. Their destinies intertwined in our cult had twisted her mind, blurring the lines between reality and the macabre fantasies that consumed her. The events that unfolded would forever stain her name in the annals of criminal history. As the sun set on that chilling January day, the stage was set for an act of unspeakable violence. Krista Gale Pike, fueled by jealousy and a twisted obsession, led her unsuspecting classmate Colleen Slemmer into the heart of darkness. Pike, accompanied by her boyfriend Tatterell Shipp and their accomplice Shadala Peterson, lured Slemmer to an isolated, abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee campus. What transpired within those walls would forever haunt the nightmares of those who heard the tale. Once inside the desolate confines of the steam plant, the true nature of Pike's sinister intentions was revealed. Slemmer, unsuspecting and vulnerable, was about to become the victim of a sadistic display of power and cruelty. For the next 30 minutes, Slemmer endured unimaginable torment at the hands of Pike and Shipp, while Peterson stood watch as a lookout. The air was thick fear and the stench of evil as Pike unleashed her darkest desires upon her helpless victim. Slemmer was subjected to a relentless barrage of physical and psychological abuse. She was taunted, beaten, and slashed, her cries for mercy falling on deaf ears. Pike's twisted fascination with the occult manifested in a horrifying act that defied comprehension. As the torment continued, Pike carved a pentagram into Slemmer's chest, a grotesque symbol of her deranged beliefs. The pain and terror etched into Slemmer's face were a testament to the depths of human depravity. But the horror did not end there. In a final act of brutality, Pike seized a large chunk of asphalt and brought it crashing down upon Slemmer's skull, extinguishing her life in a sickening display of violence. The echoes of that fatal blow reverberated through the halls of the steam plant, forever staining its walls with the blood of the innocent. Pike, consumed by her sadistic desires, kept a piece of Slemmer's skull as a chilling memento of her heinous act. She paraded it around the school, a macabre trophy that showcased the depths of her depravity. But evil cannot hide forever. Within 36 hours, Pike, Shipp, Peterson were apprehended. Detectives discovered the piece of skull in Pike's jacket pocket, a damning piece of evidence that would seal their fate. The truth behind Slemmer's horrifying fate was laid bare, and Pike's confession to the torture and murder only solidified the case against her. Prosecution, armed with irrefutable evidence and Pike's own admission, charged her with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. On March 22, 1996, after just a few hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Pike was found guilty on both counts, and the weight of her heinous crimes bore down upon her as the judge handed down her sentence. Pike was sentenced to death by electrocution for the murder charge, a punishment befitting the unimaginable horror she had inflicted upon Colleen Slemmer. But her reign of terror did not end there. Following her guilty verdict, Pike launched a series of appeals in the Tennessee state courts. She sought to overturn her conviction, but her efforts were met with resistance from the prosecution, armed with the weight of evidence and her own confession. Pike Pike's legal battles continued, with her defense team tirelessly fighting for her life. In December 2008, her latest request for a new trial was turned down, and she was returned to death row, her allowed appeals under the rules and procedures of the state of Tennessee's criminal justice system exhausted. However, Pike's story took yet another unexpected turn. In May 2014, her lawyers entered an appeal in the federal court system, seeking a commutation of her sentence from death to life in prison. They argued on the grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel, Pike's mental illness, and the constitutionality of capital punishment in Tennessee. Antoinette Frank. Antoinette Frank is a former police officer who, on March 4, 1995, committed a violent armed robbery at a restaurant that resulted in the killing of 2 people. Antoinette Renee Frank's journey into the New Orleans Police Department, NOPD, began in 1993. Despite her troubled past and questionable qualifications, she managed to secure a position within force, setting the stage for the unimaginable crimes that would later unfold. Frank's application to the NOPD was riddled with lies and deceit. She concealed her troubled history, including failed psychiatric evaluations and a penchant for dishonesty. However, due to the department's desperate need for officers, her application was accepted and she was hired. Throughout her tenure, Frank's performance as a police officer was mostly unremarkable. Her fellow officers described her as shy and lacking decisiveness required for the job. She seemed to blend into the background, never standing out amongst her peers. However, despite her lackluster performance, Frank managed to receive Officer of the Month awards for her community work, a fact that would later shock those who knew her true nature. Behind the scenes, Frank had developed a relationship with a notorious drug dealer named Rogers Lacaze. Their connection would prove to be a catalyst for the dark path that lay ahead. It was this relationship that would ultimately lead to the violent armed robbery that would forever change the lives of those involved. It was a seemingly ordinary night when Antoinette Frank and Rogers Lacaze set their plan into motion. The target of their sinister plot was a local restaurant run by a Vietnamese American family. Little did the Vu family know that their lives were about to be shattered by the unimaginable violence that was about to unfold. In the days leading up to the robbery, Frank and Lacaze visited the restaurant multiple times, meticulously studying its layout and observing the routines of the staff. They knew that timing was crucial, and they wanted to ensure that their plan would be executed flawlessly. On the night of the crime, Frank and Lacaze entered the restaurant with a chilling determination. Their faces masked by darkness, they approached the security guard, Ronald A. Williams II, who stood watch over the establishment. Without warning, they opened fire, ending his life in a hail of bullets. The sound of gunshots echoed through the restaurant, sending shockwaves of terror through the unsuspecting patrons. Panic ensued as Frank and Lacaze turned their attention to the family, who were caught in the crossfire of their ruthless rampage. 2 members of the Vu family, whose only crime was running a successful business, fell victim to the senseless violence. As the smoke cleared and the chaos subsided, the restaurant was left stained with the blood of innocent lives. The once vibrant and bustling establishment had become a haunting crime scene, forever etched in the memories of those who survived. The news of the heinous crime spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the community. How could someone who was supposed to protect and serve commit such unspeakable acts? The revelation of Antoinette Frank. Involvement left everyone questioning the integrity of the police force and the darkness that can lurk within anyone. The aftermath of the restaurant robbery was a whirlwind of investigations, as law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to bring Antoinette Frank and Rogers Lacaze to justice. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and it was clear that they would face the full force of the legal system for their heinous crimes. Both Frank and Lacaze were arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The weight of their actions hung heavy as they awaited their trials, knowing the consequences of their choices would be severe. Lacaze's trial was the first to take place. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution presented a compelling case against him. Witnesses testified to his active participation in the planning and execution of the robbery, leaving no doubt as to his guilt. The jury deliberated and found him guilty, sentencing him to death. The spotlight then turned to Antoinette Frank as her trial began. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to witness the trial of the woman who once worn a badge of honor. The prosecution laid out a compelling case, presenting evidence that linked Frank directly to the crime scene and the murders. The sentencing phase of the trial was equally intense. The prosecution argued for the harshest punishment, highlighting the heinous nature of the crimes and the devastating impact on the victims' families. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded for leniency, citing Frank's troubled past and the possibility of rehabilitation. In the end, the judge handed down the ultimate punishment, death. Antoinette Frank was sentenced to die for her crimes, joining Rogers Lacaze on death row. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, with some finding solace in the justice served, while others were left grappling with the weight of the decision. Antoinette Frank remains incarcerated at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women, awaiting her fate on death row. The once shy police officer turned convicted murderer has become the most feared woman in U.S. prison, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within anyone. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Carol Pittman, later known as Aileen Wuornos, was born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. From the very beginning, her life was marred by instability and abuse. Aileen's parents divorced when she was just a child, leaving her in the care of her grandparents. But this newfound newfound stability was short-lived, as her grandparents struggled to provide the love and support she desperately needed. Aileen's troubled childhood took a sinister turn when she became the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of her own grandfather. This unimaginable trauma would leave an indelible mark on her psyche, forever altering the course of her life. As Aileen grew older, her troubled past manifested in a series of risky behaviors. She engaged in sexual activities at a young age, seeking solace and validation in the wrong places. At the tender age of 14, tragedy struck Aileen's life once again. She was raped by a family friend, resulting in an unplanned pregnancy. Aileen gave birth to a son, but the weight of her circumstances proved too much to bear. Her son was put up for adoption, forever separating them. With her world shattered and her innocence stolen, Aileen spiraled into a life of crime and prostitution. Her volatile personality and history of violent behavior would soon come to the forefront, as she embarked on a path that would forever brand her as a notorious figure. And so, the stage was set for the emergence of a woman whose name would become synonymous with fear and horror. With her troubled past haunting her every step, Aileen Wuornos found herself trapped in a world of desperation and survival. Turning to a life of prostitution, she roamed the streets of Florida, seeking refuge in the shadows. It was in the late 1980s that Wuornos' life took a sinister turn. Driven by a volatile mix of rage, fear, and a thirst for revenge, she embarked on a series of murders that would send shockwaves through the nation. Wuornos targeted men who solicited her services as a prostitute, luring them into her web of deceit. She claimed that she acted in self-defense, asserting that her victims had either raped or attempted to rape her, but the evidence painted a different picture. Investigators pieced together a chilling narrative of calculated violence. It became clear that Wuornos' motives extended beyond self-defense. The sheer brutality of her crimes left a trail of devastation in her wake. In 1991, the walls finally closed in on Aileen Wuornos. She was apprehended by law enforcement, ending her reign of terror. The nation watched as her trial unfolded, captivated by the shocking details that emerged. Aileen Wuornos was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder. The weight of her crimes bore down upon her as she faced the consequences of her actions. Throughout her time on death row, Wuornos maintained her innocence, claiming that she had been the victim of abuse and harassment in prison. Her anger and frustration were palpable as she spoke out about her experiences. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Her story, one of darkness and despair, came to a close, but the legacy of her crimes continues to fascinate and provoke debate. Wuornos' murderous spree sent shockwaves through the nation as the details of her crimes emerged. The debate surrounding her motives and mental state raged on, with some seeing her as a victim pushed to the edge, while others condemned her as a heartless killer. Genene Jones. Born into a world of uncertainty and instability, Genene Jones's early life would shape the path she would eventually take. Genene Ann Jones, a name that would become synonymous with terror and death, had a humble and troubled beginning. Genene Jones was adopted at a young age, a twist of fate that would set the stage for the darkness that would consume her later in life. Raised in a household plagued by turmoil, she yearned for stability and a sense of belonging. Little did anyone know this innocent-looking girl would grow up to become the most feared woman in U.S. prison. As Genene entered adulthood, she sought solace in the world of beauty and glamour. She pursued a career as a beautician, honing her skills in the art of transformation. But beneath the surface of her seemingly ordinary life, a sinister desire began to take hold. The allure of power and control called to Genene, beckoning her to explore a darker path. It was during this time that she made a fateful decision that would change the course of her life forever. Genene set her sights on a new profession, one that would grant her access to the most vulnerable members of society. Genene Jones became a licensed vocational nurse, a position that would provide her with the perfect cover for her sinister intentions. With her newfound authority, she could manipulate and exploit those who were entrusted to her care. Little did anyone suspect the horrors that awaited. Armed with her medical knowledge and a heart devoid of empathy, Genene began her reign of terror. She used injections of digoxin, heparin, and succinylcholine to induce medical crises in her young patients. The innocent lives that crossed her path came pawns in her deadly game, but it was in a hospital in Texas where Genene's true nature began to reveal itself. A statistically improbable number of children under her care met untimely and suspicious deaths. The hospital administration grew suspicious, and they made a shocking decision. The hospital asked all licensed vocational nurses, including Genene Jones, to resign. It seemed as though justice would finally catch up to her. However, to the dismay of many, no further investigation was pursued. Genene slipped through the cracks, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and shattered lives. Unfazed by the close call, Genene sought new opportunities to satisfy her insatiable thirst for power. She found herself at a pediatrician's clinic, a place where she could continue her deadly game, but little did she know her reign of terror was about to come crashing down. It was at the clinic that Genene's true nature was exposed. She was charged with poisoning 6 innocent children, sending shockwaves through the community. The evidence against her was overwhelming, leaving no doubt about her guilt. Courtroom became a stage for the horrors she had inflicted upon her victims. Genene Jones was sentenced to 99 years in prison for the murder of 1 child and an additional 60 years for nearly killing another. The justice system had finally caught up to her, but the scars she left behind would never fully heal. The arrest of Genene Jones sent shockwaves through the nation as as the full extent of her heinous crimes came to light. The courtroom became a stage for justice as the victims and their families sought closure and retribution. But the story of Genene Jones did not end her conviction. It took a series of unexpected twists and turns that would leave the world in disbelief. The trial of Genene Jones was a harrowing affair, as the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against her. The stories of the survivors and the heart-wrenching testimonies of the families who lost their loved ones painted a picture of a woman devoid of remorse or empathy. The jury deliberated and the verdict was delivered. Genene Jones was sentenced to 99 years in prison for the murder of one child and an additional 60 years for nearly killing another. It seemed as though justice had finally been served and the world could breathe a sigh of relief, but the story took an unexpected turn. In 2018, Genene Jones was scheduled for release, a decision that sent shockwaves through the community. The thought of this remorseless killer walking free haunted the nightmares of those who had been touched by her crimes. However, fate had a different plan. Just as it seemed that Genene would be set free, a new indictment was handed down. Another child's death was attributed to her, and the charges were brought forth to prevent her release. In 2020, Genene Jones stood before the court once again. This time, she pleaded guilty to the murder of one child, a chilling admission that sent shockwaves through the court. The judge, faced with the gravity of her crimes, sentenced her to life in prison, ensuring that she would never walk free again. Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine May Wood. In the early 1980s, Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine May Wood found themselves working side by side as nurses' aides in this quiet and unsuspecting facility. At first glance, they appeared to be caring, compassionate individuals, dedicated to the well-being of their elderly patients. But behind their friendly smiles, a sinister connection was forming. Gwendolyn and Catherine quickly struck up a friendship, bonding over their shared experiences and the challenges of their demanding profession. They found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the stress and emotional toll of their work. But little did anyone suspect the true nature of their relationship. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, their friendship deepened, evolving into something far more sinister. Their connection went beyond mere camaraderie. It became a twisted love affair, fueled by a shared desire for power and control. Behind closed doors, away from prying eyes, Gwendolyn and Catherine reveled in their newfound bond. They reveled in the knowledge that they held the lives of the vulnerable elderly residents in their hands. It was a sick and twisted game they played, a game that would soon escalate into something far more sinister. Together, they hatched a plan that would forever change the lives of those residing within the walls of Alpine Manor. They would use their positions of trust to carry out a series of heinous acts that would shock an entire nation. It was in the year 1987 that Gwendolyn and Catherine's twisted game took a deadly turn. Their victims were the very people they were entrusted to care for, elderly residents suffering from Alzheimer's disease. To them, these vulnerable individuals were mere pawns in their sinister plan. Gwendolyn and Catherine turned the selection of their victims into a macabre game. They aimed to spell out the word murder with their initials, a sickening testament to their twisted sense of power and control. Each victim represented a letter, a step closer to completing their horrifying puzzle. The method they chose to carry out their heinous acts was suffocation. With cold and calculated precision, they smothered their victims, snuffing out their lives and extinguishing any flicker of hope that remained within them. The very hands that were meant to provide comfort became instruments of death, but their sinister game didn't end there. Gwendolyn and Catherine counted each murder as a day, symbolizing their eternal love and the depths of their depravity. With each life they took, their bond grew stronger, fueled by the thrill of their sadistic acts. Wood testified that Graham took souvenirs from their victims, mementos of their twisted love affair. But despite Wood's claims, no physical evidence was ever found to substantiate these chilling details. The true extent of their actions may never be fully known. The unraveling of their dark secret began when Catherine Wood's ex-husband, burdened by the weight of their shared past, made the decision to go to the police. He revealed the horrifying truth of what had been happening within the walls of the Alpine Manor nursing home, setting in motion a chain of events that would shock the nation. As the investigation unfolded, the true extent of Gwendolyn and Catherine's crimes began to emerge. Wood portrayed Graham as the mastermind, the hands-on killer who carried out their deadly plans. The evidence against Graham was overwhelming, leaving little doubt of her involvement in the heinous acts that had taken place. Gwendolyn Graham was arrested, her once charming smile replaced by a look of cold detachment. She maintained her innocence, denying any involvement in the murders that had sent shockwaves through the community. But the weight of the evidence against her was insurmountable. Gwendolyn Graham was found guilty of 5 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. The judge handed down the harshest punishment possible, 5 life sentences, ensuring that she would spend the rest of her days behind bars. Catherine Wood, on the other hand, faced charges of second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit second-degree murder. She received a lesser sentence of 20 years. On each count, a decision that left many questioning whether justice had truly been served. Today, Gwendolyn Graham remains incarcerated, serving out her life sentences, while Catherine Wood was released in 2020. The haunting legacy of their crimes lingers, a reminder of the depths of human depravity. The case of Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine Wood serves as a chilling reminder that evil can wear many masks. Behind the facade of compassion and care, darkness can lurk, waiting to be unleashed. unleashed. It is a cautionary tale that reminds us to remain vigilant and to never underestimate the depths of human depravity. Mary Beth Rowe Tinning. Mary Beth Rowe Tinning, born on September 11, 1942 in Duanesburg, New York, seemed like an ordinary woman, but behind her seemingly normal facade lay a darkness that would eventually consume her. Let's take a closer look at her early life and the events that would shape her twisted path. Mary Beth grew up in a small town, surrounded by a loving family. On the surface, everything appeared to be idyllic, but little did anyone know darkness that lurked within her. As she entered adulthood, Mary Beth's life took a tragic turn when she married her husband, Joseph Tinning, in the late 1960s. It was during their marriage that the first signs of something sinister began to emerge. Mary Beth and Joseph welcomed their first child, Barbara, into the world in 1972, but just 8 days later, tragedy struck. Barbara's life was cut short, and the cause of death was listed as sudden infant death syndrome, IDEs. Unbeknownst to the world, this was just the beginning of a string of mysterious deaths that would haunt the Tinning family. Over the next decade, Mary Beth and Joseph would go on to have 8 more children, all of whom met untimely and suspicious ends. Their second child, Joseph Jr., died in 1973 at just 8 months old. Once again, Cy Diaz was blamed for the tragedy. The Tinnings' third child, Barbara Ann, followed suit in 1974, also falling victim to Cy Diaz. The pattern continued with their fourth child, Michael, who died in 1975 at the age of 2 months. As the years went by, the deaths of the Tinning children became more frequent and more perplexing. Mary Beth and Joseph's fifth child, Mary Frances, died in 1978 at the age of 3 months. Their sixth child, Jonathan, passed away in 1980 at just 4 months old. The seventh child, William, died in 1981 at the age of 4 months. And tragically, their eighth child, Jennifer, died in 1985 at the age of 8 months. Throughout this harrowing period, Mary Beth Tinning managed to evade suspicion. The deaths of her children were initially believed to be the result of genetic abnormalities or tragic accidents, but the truth was far more sinister. It wasn't until the death of their ninth child, Tammy Lynn, that authorities began to unravel the horrifying truth. Tammy Lynn died on February 20th, 1985, at the age of 4 months. The cause of death was listed as cardiopulmonary arrest, but something didn't add up. Suspicion grew when it was discovered that Tammy Lynn had no signs of illness or genetic abnormalities. Investigators dug deeper into the Tinning family's history and discovered a shocking pattern. All 9 of their children had died under suspicious circumstances, and Mary Beth was the common denominator. The evidence pointed to one chilling conclusion: Mary Beth Rowe Tinning was a serial killer. As the shocking truth about Mary Beth Rowe Tinning began to unravel, investigators delved deeper into the mysterious deaths of her children. The evidence they uncovered painted a chilling picture of a mother who had turned her own home into a house of horrors. The deaths of Mary Beth's first 8 children had initially been attributed to genetic abnormalities or tragic accidents, but with the death of Tammy Lynn, authorities finally had enough evidence to suspect foul play. The absence of any medical explanation for her death raised red flags and prompted a thorough investigation. Forensic experts meticulously examined the medical records and autopsy reports of all the Tinning children. They discovered a disturbing pattern of unexplained deaths, all occurring within a short span of time. The sheer number of fatalities within one family was unprecedented, leading investigators to suspect that something far more sinister was at play. As the evidence mounted, the focus shifted to Mary Beth herself. Friends and family members were interviewed, and a shocking picture began to emerge. Mary Beth was described as overly attentive to her children's health, often seeking medical attention for minor ailments. Some even recalled instances where she seemed to enjoy the attention and sympathy that came with having a sick child. Armed with this information, investigators built a case against Mary Beth Rowe Tinning. They believed she suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder in which a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in a child for attention. It was a chilling revelation that shed light on the motive behind the deaths of her children. In 1987, Mary Beth Tinning was arrested and charged with the murder of Tammy Lynn. The trial was a media sensation, with the public captivated by the horrifying story of a mother who had taken the lives of her own children. Mary Beth Tinning was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Her case shed light on a little-known disorder called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, MSBP, in which a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in a child for attention. It is believed that Tinning suffered from this disorder, using her children as pawns in her twisted quest for sympathy and attention. Mary Beth's conviction sent shockwaves through the community, raising questions about the nature of maternal love and the depths of human depravity. How could a mother, someone entrusted with the care and protection of her children, commit such heinous acts? The legacy of the Tinning children will forever be marred by the darkness that consumed their lives. Their deaths serve as a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk within the most unexpected places. The story of the most feared women in U.S. prison is a chilling reminder of the depths of human darkness. For similar stories that will send chills down your spine, click on one of the cards displayed on your screen.